So firstly, hello everybody. I'd just like to say thanks to SEGD for inviting us here today. We've obviously come a long way to be here, and we're very excited to show you what we do. We hope you'll obviously gain some insights into the kind of things that we're doing on the other side of the world. Some of you may recognise us from last year's awards. Here's a lovely shot of some of us. You probably thought, what's this guy doing, bringing these kids to the awards? But Paul Tabray, who's actually also in the room tonight, is the co-founder with myself. We actually studied at college together in the UK before, like a lot of Brits do, moved to Australia for some warm weather and nice cold beer, and eventually starting up there in 2002. Whilst I'm now based in Singapore, Paul leads the Australian team in Sydney, and Charlie, who's alongside me here today, who's also English, by the way, he heads up the environments team there. So who is there? Well, we are a creative agency specialising in brand-centric experiences for the built environment. With a sort of a long background in brand communications, both in the UK and Australia, I suppose brand has always been a common thread in our work. And this, together with a deep passion for the built environment design, essentially forms the space that we play in, where we communicate stories, we help navigate spaces, we activate places, and ultimately helping people connect to place. We've been really lucky to work with some of the world's foremost innovative brands and organisations, and also get to collaborate with many of the leading architects and interior designers on some really, really great projects. So now we have more than 20 staff and based over 2 studios in Sydney, Australia, and Singapore, which was started up about 5 years ago. So our work really now covers the whole of the Asia-Pacific region, broad breadth of projects. So before we go into our work and our thinking a little bit more, we just wanted to give you a short clip on a glimpse in the life at there. So a quick video here.
So our talk today is titled Magic and Logic, and we think that they're 2 really good words that help to describe the way that we start to create branded environments. They describe how we try to use a combination of left brain and right brain thinking to creatively solve design challenges that we're set. And then within that overall topic, we think there are 4 main elements that really come across in a lot of the projects that we do. Now, those elements are storytelling, navigation, activation, and playfulness. And today what we're going to do is talk you through those 4 elements and show you how they've all become considerations in the way that we work and the way that we think. First up, our first element is storytelling. So good storytelling to us is really all about putting a really compelling story at the core of your design. Storytelling can be anything from creatively telling a brand story through to interpreting something about an aspect of history or heritage. We think there that storytelling is really effective when a narrative is really clearly communicated, but that doesn't mean to say that we believe it means you have to be obvious with how you do it. This piece was done for BBC Worldwide, and it was a feature wall in their reception area. So the piece was designed, it used over 80 domestic objects, and they all represented one of the BBC's top-rated TV shows. So before the BBC moved into this office, the way they did it before was hanging large format posters of their TV shows on the walls. And to us, it was a really obvious way of telling their story, and we thought there's got to be a more engaging, a more compelling way of doing this for them. So instead of having overt imagery, we decided to represent each one of their TV shows with a domestic object. And it created a much more abstract storyline, but we thought that it gives people a real moment of discovery when they actually realise all of the symbolism behind the objects. The whole piece was CNC'd out of high-density foam and painted white, so it was quite economical, it was light, you could hang it on a wall, but ultimately it helped us create a really neutral feature that would hopefully stand the test of time. Now, workplaces often provide a really great canvas for storytelling. As we all know, people spend a lot of time at work, so that means as designers we have to find more innovative ways of communicating stories to those staff so they don't feel overbearing when you see them day in, day out. Our approach is often to create stories that have a bit more of a slow burn effect, and that's a message which unveils itself over time, and it helps to keep the space feeling quite fresh. So this piece was a project we did for Rabobank. Now, Rabobank are a bank who deal primarily in agribusiness or providing finance solutions to farmers. So Rabobank's story is really all about their connection to country. They wanted this new city workplace to feel really connected to the rural communities that they were serving. But their aesthetic is quite modern, and they wanted our graphic layer to be really simple and clean and stand the test of time. And so for them, we found our solution in the visual language of cartography or land mapping, the way that old maps used to use patterns to denote different types of land use. Taking this idea, we developed a pattern library, and then we could use that across our graphics. Each pattern became a representation of a different type of farming, so it could be anything from arable to dairy to livestock. We could then use these patterns to start to tell subtle stories embedded in the space about farming in Australia and New Zealand. The graphics were used whole scale across the project. Here they created large-scale placemaking features. They lined central stairs, and that was designed to encourage employees to move about the space and discover new areas of their office. We also purposely used different patterns on each floor. We wanted each floor to feel slightly different from the next. So as you're moving around the building, you've got a different sense of identity. We decorated the back of house corridors with little domestic raw touches as well. So we put imagery of boots and umbrellas and household objects dotted around, and this helped to bring a really overt connection back to the members of staff about the customers that they were serving. And even the employees' lockers had a layer of narrative added to it as well. So in this office, it's important to say that Rabobank were moving to an activity-based working model. So the lockers for them became a really important touch point in a staff's general day. And so for that reason, we really wanted to give them a special treatment. So we added patterns to the lockers that mimicked a patchwork of fields when you looked at them from the sky. But then up close, we embedded tiny little details into the graphics, which reinforce this overall theming that we had. So on the left, you might be able to spot there's a little tractor mowing one of the lines through the doors. In the center, there's a tiny bee that makes up one of the triangles. And then there's an apple that makes up one of the polka dots on the right as well. So these tiny details hopefully provide a hidden layer of narrative as well that people can discover well into the future. Now onto another workplace project, but this one had a very different layer of storytelling. So this project was for Roche. They're a global pharmaceutical company, and they've got a really strong focus on innovation in healthcare. Now, Roche were moving into a new office. They were consolidating a whole heap of other spaces into one centralised location. And we were brought on board to provide a layer of signage and graphics and hopefully make the space feel a little bit more on brand. The difficulty with the brief, though, was that the space had been designed as an open plan office. They wanted to facilitate a boundaryless workplace. And so we didn't really have many walls to play with. We didn't have the opportunity to add our traditional branding graphics or signage. So we ended up redefining the brief, and what we looked at doing was what we call bookending the space. So we figured out that if we could wrap the north and the south lift cores at either end of the building, then we could start to create very distinct zones within the space. Now, this would help people orientate themselves in the space, so it helped from navigation point of view, but it also gave different teams and departments a recognisable backdrop to sit their team against. When we were researching the brand early on, we discovered that they had this really long history of collecting art, particularly in their Swiss headquarters. And so that gave us the idea of using art as a placemaking device. And so instead of us producing the graphics, we proposed that we should commission 4 different artists to each come in and hand paint each of the 4 lift cores with 4 unique designs. The artists were that we commissioned, they were each asked to explore the parallels of art and science, so in fitting with the brand. But specifically, each artist was given a brand value to represent in their work. When finished, each artwork was over 25 metres long, and they wrapped the lift cores at the north and south ends of the building. So whilst each artwork was naturally different because it was by a different artist, we actually purposely chose the placement of each artist to ensure that we had a really different feel from one end of the building to the other. I'm just going to take you through one particular piece of the artwork. So this is a piece by Tom Polo. He's a successful emerging artist from Sydney. And Tom's brand value that he was given to work with was empathy. So for his response to this idea of empathy, Tom wanted to speak to Roche employees. He wanted to hear firsthand what they had to say about working for the company. And his idea was to interview the staff and then take the words that they gave him and start to knit together a piece of typography that would work its way along his wall work. So Tom posed a series of questions to the employees, and with the responses he got, he created the poetic line, "With precious actions, these vibrant outcomes." And now you can see these words starting to work their way along the installation. They work their way from one end of the lift core to the other. And as you're walking around that space, you can start to read the story that he's applied to the walls. He also really wanted to represent the people that helped him create the work as well. So Tom dotted his work with hidden faces that peer out at you from the splashes of paint. They're a series of caricatures, and they're designed to represent this really collegiate workplace. He also wanted his work to be highly inspirational. He wanted to increase creativity and freedom of expression between employees. And then the final part of this project was to tell this story back of the artist's involvement back to the staff themselves. We wanted these artworks to be seen as artworks, and so for that reason we installed exhibition plaques for each one, and they interpreted their meaning and ultimately explained the relevance of the piece back to the Roche brand. Finally, for this case study, we're just going to show you a short video of each of the 4 artworks being installed.
Another project influenced by art, but of a different kind, is Garangira Gallery, pictured here, which is located on a 5,000 hectare private estate in rural New South Wales, Australia. And it houses a privately owned collection of Indigenous artworks. So our brief here was to aid placemaking with a facade design that would tell a story all its own. The main facade of the gallery was to be constructed using timber, originally sourced from a recently demolished bridge which once crossed the Pine River, and it also ran through the estate. So drawing inspiration from the recycled timber's provenance, our interpretive design captures the winding river bends at a dramatic scale across a series of timber panels and blades. These blades that punctuate the facade also enable moving shadows to create a kind of a flowing effect as the sun changes and moves across the building. So just as storytelling is at the core of Aboriginal art, storytelling is also at the basis of the facade design, drawing inspiration from the context of the site and the heritage of the materials. The second element we'd like to talk about is one that's nearly always critical, and that's navigation. Good intuitive navigation has a direct impact on people's physical and emotional experience of a place. So we approach wayfinding as not only the task of helping navigate from A to B, but also see it as a real opportunity to reinforce the brand or destination story. This idea of weaving the DNA of a destination into its signage to help tell its story is something we're doing for a new mixed-use development in Singapore called Funan. Now, this is actually a live project currently going through our studio, so we're giving you guys a bit of a sneak peek here today. Funan is located at a real geographical and cultural intersection of Singapore. Aimed at a much younger demographic than normal, the vision for Funan is one where creativity, craft and commerce converge. Designed by Woods Bagot, the architecture also has this idea of intersection at the root of its design, with various intersecting architectural forms coming together to create the building profile. So this idea of intersection and how different forms cross and overlap really started to form the initial ideation of the design system, of the signage system. From the brand logo, which is also formed from overlapping letter forms, we also developed a custom display typeface. And this typeface is going to be utilised across all relevant signage and environmental graphics. So key sign types, whether standalone, suspended, or wall fixed, are all going to be typically made up from two intersecting shapes. And so this dynamic design is a really good example of how both the architecture and the geographical location inform the solution. Another mixed-use development this time in Australia is Barangaroo. For those that don't know, Barangaroo is the largest foreshore development, is Australia's largest foreshore development, comprising a series of commercial skyscrapers, public parkland, and retail precincts. So we were tasked with creating a signage system to help navigate the 80,000 square metre car park that ran the entire length of the site. Such a huge site required a lot of upfront research, plotting multiple user journeys throughout the space and identifying the pain points along the way. One of the biggest challenges was the scale of the site. We literally had a lot of ground to cover, and so our solution focused on super graphic applications that would have bold impact from a distance, but also be economical to install. It's important that when underground, you have a good idea of where you are in relation to above ground. So we used a distinct colour coding system to inform people where they are in relation to the 3 commercial towers that were above. The colours used related to the key colour schemes of the architectural palette for each tower, so there is a consistent wayfinding cues above and below ground. It's also important not to forget people's journey out of the precinct. So all exit messaging adopted a green colour scheme to help with this. And we've got another little quick video here to give you a bit more of insight into this project.
Now, this next wayfinding project was an opportunity for us to use research studies to help create an evidence-based wayfinding system. So the client for this project owns a vast entertainment resort, and they knew that their existing wayfinding system was really flawed. And so we were initially commissioned to audit the current signage and try to figure out what was going wrong. So initially we conducted what we called wayfinding safaris. We enlisted members of the public to start to test user journeys through the site. Here are some of our lucky participants up on screen. Worth noting at this point that in these safaris, nearly all of them got lost when trying to navigate from one side of the complex to the other. Another research study that we did monitored entry points into the site, and from this we started to gather data about the people who were visiting. We were able to find out how old they were, what languages they spoke, how did they get to the site, where did they come from, and where were they going. And from this data, we were able to determine some fundamentals about the visitors' wayfinding requirements. And we actually discovered some things that the client didn't even realise about the site themselves. We were able to pinpoint what amenities within the site were primary attractions, and then we could start to work out what was the best way to get them to their chosen destination. So all of the research informed our signage design, and this is a snapshot from the concept presentation we're doing. It's currently working its way through the studio at the moment. We distilled the primary offers of the precinct into 7 main destinations, and then this becomes the backbone of our signage system. So information is always displayed in this very linear structure, the idea being that no matter where you are in the precinct, you can always gather your relationship to everything else around you. This system can then be animated as well into a series of dynamic maps, and this helps people to start to interact with it at touchscreen kiosks. The system of displaying information in this way helps to maintain a really consistent level of simplicity, but the interactive screens allow people to start to curate their own journeys through the space as well, so they're not relying on static signage. We're also developing a series of dynamic totem forms for the client, and these are aimed to provide a landmark element in a really busy visual environment. So curved LED panels run up the edges of the sign forms, and these are designed to catch people's attention from a distance. The idea being that your next wayfinding touch point should always be visible in your path of travel and you're not left alone or felt like you've been abandoned in your journey. We can then also start to group signage elements together as well. So we can use totems and overhead signage to create what we're calling portals. Used together, these start to highlight transition zones from one amenity to the next and help to guide people around the precinct. We're more and more increasingly being asked to design wayfinding systems for agile spaces as well. So this was a system we created for a university in Sydney. It's actually one of the first instances globally where a university has implemented an agile campus, and that's one that's not fully owned by any one faculty or department. So because it was an agile space, it had designated areas assigned to certain types of working, and that could be anything from quiet zones to breakout areas or collaboration zones. So we knew that our signage needed to really quickly communicate these different functions to students. And so we did that through creating some iconography and naming, and that helps to make each type of space really intuitive to people to use. But ultimately, we knew that for an agile space, we had to introduce a digital layer of wayfinding that could support the different functions, and it could be highly customizable by each visitor as well. So we believe that digital wayfinding not only fosters innovation, but it also helps to create a really great sense of cohesion between the different campuses. Our system was called the Campus Navigator, and it was located at the major decision-making points along a number of key journeys. This is a snapshot of the home screen as well. You can see that we've used footage of people. They're actually real students as well, and they populate the background of the screens so that even if the system isn't being used, the screens are constantly feeling active and animated. The system draws data from a range of different feeds, and that helps with lots of different wayfinding issues. So from this one touch point, you can find a member of staff, you can book a room to study in, you can find a spare computer to work at, but also really importantly, it connects back to the outside world as well. So it can tell you when the next bus is about to arrive or if it's about to start raining outside. Just got a little video now showing you the system in action.
So the third element we're going to talk about is activation. I'm sure we'd all agree the environment and the sense of place it creates is becoming more important than ever, especially with the growth of social media. Now everyone seems to be a photographer and wants to create this Instagrammable moment to share. This presents a real opportunity to express the qualities of a place or activating areas to help inspire visitors, stimulate intended usage, or prompt social interaction. The arrival experience of a place presents a really great opportunity to set the tone for what's to come. So we created this entry feature wall for 3M, welcoming visitors to their Australian headquarters. And it showcases the brand evolution over the last 100 years. Each one of 3M's brand marks is made up from varying layers to create a subtle yet visually impactful wall relief. The brand's rich heritage is further celebrated with milestone dates and historical info, shown at a small-scale detail to create a somewhat unconventional brand timeline. I already showed you a little bit today of some of the other signage for Funan, but another large part of our work there is going to be placemaking based, helping activate key areas and aspects of the destination. In a first for Singapore, and probably for many other places, A dedicated bike path will run right through the entire ground level of the development before dissolving into the surrounding urban area and connecting with existing public cycleways. Your ears didn't deceive you, you heard that right, a bike path right through the middle of a busy retail mall. So aside from obviously trying to minimize potential collisions with various directional and safety signage, our task has also been to activate the bike path and its various associated facilities. One of these facilities is what they're calling the bike hub, which will house various related amenities such as a bike hire outlet, repair stations, bike parking, shower change facilities. So a series of fabricated panels comprising signage, various bike parts, tools, and related relatable objects will be fixed to exterior walls to help activate these areas. And so by combining placemaking visuals, tone of voice, directional aids in this way, we're really starting to create visual landmarks imbued with the personality of a destination. We often deploy large-scale super graphics, as you've seen already on some of our projects, and this really provides maximum impact with minimum budget. The end-of-trip facilities at Barangaroo, of which we showed you some earlier car park signage, is such an example of this approach. Our design drew inspiration from the naval base heritage of the site, referencing razzle-dazzle patterning. So for those not familiar with razzle-dazzle, no, it's not a show here on the Strip in Vegas. It's actually a type of camouflage that was used and painted on naval warships, mainly in World War I and II. So we used this as inspiration for our graphics. The razzle-dazzle graphics were combined with various bike part illustrations to amplify the intended usage and feeling of the space. The graphics also had to be brand agnostic, as the facilities were shared by many different companies. So a maritime-themed colour palette helped with this.
And so there we believe that brand activation always doesn't mean the application of flat graphics, and quite often what we'll try and do is get our projects built into the DNA of a space so they feel really integrated and part of the host architecture that they're in. This was a piece that we designed for Knight Frank, who are a global property company, and when they opened their new Sydney offices, they wanted to create an impact by having an innovation zone, and this was a space that they could share with customers and clients and promote collaborative working and problem solving. Now, in an early workshop session with the client, they told us that they were always innovating, always evolving, and that gave us the beginnings of our final idea. So simply put, we thought, what if we took their logo, which is on the left, and we started to twist it? And that would kind of create this morphing, evolving form that we could then use as a basis for an installation. The final result is a sculptural dramatic feature wall. There's 49 individual acrylic blades, and they move from one end of the space to the other. And although static, we think they provide a real sense of movement and energy, which is perfect as a backdrop for innovation. Here's a little video just to show you that piece being installed. And now we come to our final element to take you through, and this is the element of fun. So as Brits, we think we're pretty well known for having a unique sense of humour, and so bringing playfulness into our work is really important to us. Play can really help to create a positive mood in a space, and it can help make places feel really memorable. The first project that's in this element is for Ovolo Hotels, and they own a chain of hotels through the Asia-Pacific region. Their latest venture was to open a hotel set in an old wharf on the side of Sydney Harbour. Now, within the wharf, Ovolo asked us to design a signage system that would help to direct people to the different amenities on offer within the big space. But we knew that their brand was really modern, cheeky, it was quite fun and irreverent, and we felt that a traditional signage system just wasn't going to be in keeping with that. So instead, we developed a range of tongue-in-cheek copy lines, and these not only spoke to their youthful audience, but they also started to communicate the function of different spaces within this open plan space. So the bakery and cafe space became Baker's Gonna Bake, and the quiet library area used repurposed song lyrics to give it its identity. And this piece was used in a dining area where it reminded guests that exercise and extra fries sound very alike. And importantly, even forgotten spaces like the restrooms got their own brand of toilet humour. Now, from hospitality to workplace, it's becoming evident that modern tech companies love to use play in their office design. And as we know, workplaces can often be really high-stress environments, and so play can help to counter this. When LinkedIn approached us to work on their Sydney offices, we were tasked with creating a playfully Australian-themed environment. And so the initial idea for one of our major placemaking elements came from this really unusual Australian tradition. So if you drive around Australia, in rural towns, you'll find a series of big things. That's officially what they're called. And they're super scale sculptures that what they do is they help to make that town a bit of a tourist attraction if you're driving around the vast distances of the country. And so for their Sydney office, what we decided to was create our own big thing. We wanted to create a giant flip-flop and wedge it in the space. And we thought that this would create a really random point of difference. And it would also give them a really great backdrop for social media posts. And then, surprisingly to us, the client actually loved the idea. But we actually, instead of using flip-flops, we reined it back a little bit and we turned it into a 3D replica of their logo. And we used the blue flip-flops as cladding for the installation. So this gave them their Instagram-worthy landmark in their space, but also the flip-flops gave it this distinctly relaxed Sydney feel. And it helped to set it apart from other LinkedIn offices around the world who use the same brand assets.
And finally, sometimes the theme literally is play. We've done a lot of work for Google, and this workplace for them was completely themed around games, and in particular, arcade games and 8-bit graphics. So our playful designs had references to classics like Pac-Man and Space Invaders, whilst also subtly incorporating the Google brand. Our role often focuses on injecting some fun and energy to a place, or amplifying a specific theme. So in this ping-pong breakout space, for example, we've really tried to ramp up the graphics to add visual impact. Even the signage in this scheme is playful. It draws inspiration from one of the largest shipping containers in the world, which the Google office looked directly over. The signage system was developed using randomly stacked shipping container-like forms, and incorporate the Google brand colors as you move through the different levels. So all these elements have helped to create a space that feels distinctly Google without relying on traditional brand applications. So there you go. We hope that we've shown how logic and how a little bit of magic can enhance the user experience and really say something about the destination, ultimately helping people feel inspired, engaged, and connected. Thanks very much.
Thank you both for a really great overview and perspective of sort of what drives your work and sort of the values that you can tell are your own values as a company that you infuse into the design process and then to the end products. I want to give our audience a chance to ask any questions. I think it's often the case, particularly in North America, is design practitioners see work from Europe and from Asia and from Australia and are really awe-inspired by the extent that you're able to push the boundaries and that by the clients really guiding you, as we've spoken about, the clients really asking for quite a bit and there being quite a freedom. So I think it's a great opportunity to really share and exchange what is possible in flexing brand meaning and I think in the case of that you just left us with is play, is how you can really the brand doesn't always have to be so serious, and that it can really be human and it can really allow people to look at themselves in a very humble way. Questions, comments, thoughts, curiosities? Yes.
The bike path that you had going on in Singapore. How easy do you think that is for, say, a project in Asia versus US, where, like we're taking away swing sets and playgrounds? Like in terms of safety, is it easier to do that kind of stuff, do you think, there versus here?
It's an interesting question.
I'm not sure. I mean, I think probably safety standards in Asia are probably not quite as strict as here in America, and in Australia as well, for that matter. I don't know. I think the client, that particular client, is a very well-known developer, and they're always trying to be game changer, I suppose, in what they do. So that was always part of the brief right at the beginning, and it raised some eyebrows, for everyone involved in the project. So I think we'll see. I think they're going to obviously try it. How easy it is to do something like that over here, I couldn't tell you. We don't do work here, so.
Yes.
From a leadership perspective, if you take clients like Google or other people that you've done, it sounds like multiple projects for, do you let the same team, is it like the Google team, and that continues to work on that, or do you build new teams to get fresh ideas, or do you feel like that client relationship, does it demand that, or does it demand more of the same type of person? Does that make sense?
So obviously we've got teams across 2 studios. Both teams will often be working on the same project, especially the larger projects. So, even though it might be a project in Asia, it might be from an Australian perspective, depending on who's working on it. So we don't have Google teams, no. We have obviously a dedicated environments team that works on all the different projects. We also have a branding team as well that specifies on more specific brand projects. And there's a lot of collaboration in that way. Each of the Google projects is always run by different people as well. Google in particular, their approach is to have a distinct theme for each of their offices around the world that really draws on the local context of that city. Whereas other countries, they have more of a sort of a global standards across all their offices. So I think that enables us to bring kind of fresh ideas to every new project as well.
Other questions? Yes.
I'm curious at what phase you're usually brought into a project. It sounds like sometimes it's directly with the client may reach out to you, or often with an architect. So at what phase in the kind of interior architecture do you come to?
And you guys work with a lot of different architecture firms.
Yeah, I think we can quite easily say not early enough on most of our projects. We have really good relationships with our collaborators on projects, so architectural teams, interior designers, fabricators, and quite often we'll find that architects are our source of business, and they refer us into projects, and increasingly they know what value we can bring to a project and to get us involved early. Often though, it is a bit of a kind of a struggle to convince clients who don't really know what you do. I often say this: nobody knows what I do as a job. And so we're quite often kind of pitching to clients quite late on in the day and then having to work really quickly to pick up some traction. But yes, definitely, whenever we can, we're in there early doors, kind of getting involved and starting to get ideas really embedded in early so that we can actually integrate them into the architecture, we can get them all fully coordinated. We definitely always try and strive against having an applied approach. We don't want things to feel less stuck onto spaces. So yes, so definitely early's better, but often not the case.
Any other questions? Yes. You're going to get an award for the most questions today. It is, yes.
Do you work with a copywriter based on some of the text that you put together, like exercises? Sounds a lot like exercise. Extra fries, sorry.
You guys came up with that strategy.
Yeah. Is that like a specific team, or are you guys just really that brilliant?
You want to take this one on?
Thank you. That piece of copy was actually written by an intern who was with us. So it was one of our initial concepts. We gave that client lots and lots of different visual concepts, and the one that really struck with them was this copy-based approach, and it was really in keeping with their brand. And at the time, we had an intern who was really kind of gifted with wordsmithing, and she went away for a day and came up with heaps of different copy options and puns and kind of silly takes on music lyrics, and we pitched all of them to the client, and then certain ones of them stuck, other ones they had no idea about. I think, yes, we will try and do it in-house if we can, because it's a bit fun. But we do also work with copywriters. It's important to say we're not a very big agency, so we'll quite often bring people in. We're very good at knowing where the limit of our capability is, and so we'll bring in people to collaborate with as and when we need them.
Sounds like a great idea for a little in-house book about the sort of brandisms that you've created. Yes, that'd be great. It's been a great day. I'd like to thank Simon and Charlie for sharing their insights.